So now I'm re-recording, and this is going to be a separate file so that you can separate out the content, and they're shorter videos and they're self-contained. The second objective of today is to go over what should be in a method section and appendices, or an appendix section. But before I share my screen, I want to remind you of the 4 sections of the method, and what an appendix is, and the rules that govern them from the last lecture on APA format. So the method has 4 sections. You're going to talk about the design. You're going to talk about the prospective participants. Right now, you don't have an actual sample, so you can't tell me how many participants there were in a study. You can say we're looking for X number of participants, and we're focused on age, gender, ethnicity, religion, whatever it might be, and break it down in your participant section. After we analyze the results, you're going to rewrite the participant section and report what you really have. And I'll teach you that in a different lesson once we get our preliminary results. All right. So that your design section, your participant section, your instrument section. Every instrument you're using, including your demographics questionnaire, should be described. And then you have your procedure section, which is sort of the recipe from A to Z on how you're going to do it, your study. All right. So those are the 4 elements. And then when you do your appendices, each instrument is its own appendix. So when you describe the first instrument, you might say in the method section, see Appendix A, and then after you finish your method section and the related references to your method section, then you're going to attach your first instrument and label it at the top, Appendix A. You're going to describe your second instrument, see Appendix B, attach it at the end, and so forth. But the rules of appendices are as follows: 1 appendix per page. If there's more space on a page, you still do a page break. If an instrument goes on beyond a page and it goes a page and a half, when you're done with that instrument, you still do a page break for the next appendix. And that's so we can easily separate out what goes where. So that is the conceptual layout for the method and appendices. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, again, share my screen. And you'll notice if you go onto your Blackboard shells, you'll notice that I have a file called Method and Appendices. And this is meant to serve as a guide for what I'm looking for. So people are like, well, what's the rubric? What are you looking for? I like to create templates and examples so there's no question what I'm looking for. So let me click on that. So right now, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. As long as one person can, I know you all can. Right now, again, you learned in the lecture on APA style that there are different ways to do a title page, whether it's a student paper or a professional paper. Since this is experimental psychology and I'm teaching you to the level of learning how to actually write a professional paper, for my class, your running head will look consistent with a professional paper. So you put whatever your abbreviated title was, you remember it's 50 characters or fewer, left aligned, page number. The title page is page 1. Then you put your full title, whatever it is. Then you put your name, the College of Staten Island, City University of New York. That's your title page. And then you scroll down, page 2, you're writing your method. So in the method, it's a level 1 heading, so it's bold and centered. Write method. And then I said there are 4 sections, subsections. Your subsections are going to be level 2 headings. So design, participants, instruments, and procedures. These are your 4 subsections. But notice how even in each of the subsections of the method, I give you guidance. I want you to know what I'm looking for, and I'm going to be grading you on. So I'm telling you exactly what you should be doing in each section. Describe the kind of research design you're going to be using. Now, you had to do that for your IRB, so you've already given some thought about the design you're going to be using. Describe your independent variables for this study. If you don't have independent variables, but you're still looking at group differences such as male versus female, such as white, black, Hispanic, etc., right? Describe that you're grouping people based on ethnicity, right? Talk about how you're grouping it. And then your dependent variables are going to be your measures, your instruments that you're using. So you're measuring anxiety, you're measuring depression, you're measuring stress. So all of that should be written in the design section of the method. Then you go to your participant section. Now I'm teaching you what it should look like in its final state. You need to state your sample size, how many participants there were in your study, give a breakdown of age, gender, ethnicity, religion, and so forth. Whatever the profile of your sample was, the reader needs to know that. And obviously, not every study has the same relevant demographics variables. So if there's another factor that I didn't list, make sure you cover the relevant ones. For your submission on your method and appendices right now, all you need to do is state, in this study, we will be looking to collect data with a minimum of X number of participants. We anticipate diversity across age, gender, ethnicity, religious affiliation, and so forth, right? So notice how, because you don't know the numbers yet, you can't give me the breakdown, but in your final paper, this part of the method section must be changed. Moving to our instruments. So what I did was I gave you an example of what should be in each descriptor of your instrument. So describe what the instrument does. How many items are in the instrument? Are there any subscales? What are the range of responses? Is the instrument based on total scores or mean scores? What are the psychometric properties? So the number of items is simple. You'll know that. Are there any subscales? You'll know that too, because I'll tell you we're scoring this, that, or another. For example, those of you using the Big Five, you have 5 different subscales of the Big Five inventory. All right, now, what's the range of responses? So that's the total responses. Let's take the DAS-21. What is the lowest score a person can get on the DAS-21? 0. So if they said never to all of the items, it would be 0, right? What's the highest a person could get? Well, each item is scored from 0 to 3. Therefore, you multiply 3 times the number of items in each subscale. So 3 times 7 is 21 for depression. So for depression, total scores can range between 0 to 21. Anxiety scores can range between 0 to 21. Stress scores can range between 0 to 21. The total score of the instrument can range between 0 and 63. You see how that works? 21 times 3 is 63. So now you get an idea of it. And then I said, describe the psychometric properties. What you're looking for is Cronbach's alpha. In order for an instrument to be considered reliable and valid, you need a Cronbach's alpha of a minimum of 0.70 or higher. And then after you do that, you're going to also say, see a copy of the instrument in Appendix A, or you can word it any way you want. But so I did an example. Now, when you answer these questions, don't leave this there. This is for you as a checklist to make sure you answered everything you needed to. Delete it at the end. So when I delete it, my first instrument, which this is how you would format a level 3 heading, is the patient health questionnaire 9. So the PHQ 9 is a 9-item measure of depression. This is not the instrument I showed you. It's a separate instrument. Once you say that, you have to cite who created the instrument. So you need a reference here. Once you're doing in-text citation, what are you also doing? Creating a reference page. Now, each item was scored between 0 and 3. So what's the lowest score you could get on this? 0. What's the highest? Well, 3 times 9 is 27. So total scores range between 0 and 27. The instrument possesses strong internal consistency, reliability, and then I give the Cronbach's alpha. So that would be how you would write that. MMPI, this is a good example of when you have different clinical scales, right? So the MMPI is a 567 item measure of personality. Cite your source. The instrument has several validity scales and 10 clinical scales, which includes, you listed all of that. Each raw score is converted to a T-score, and clinical elevations are 65 or above. The MMPI possesses adequate internal consistency reliability. Notice this is 0.71. So 0.71 is the threshold of 0.70 is the threshold of acceptability. 0.9 is much higher. So 0.9 is strong, 0.7 is adequate. And then once again, your appendix. And then your demographics questionnaire, whatever items you had. Again, don't write and so forth. You actually have to list them all out. For me, I wrote and so forth because this is a demo. And then you talk about the instrument, and then you attach it as Appendix C. Then you go to your procedures. So the procedure section is an interesting one, because I want you to think of a procedure very similar to as if you were baking a cake. And you've never baked a cake in your life before. What would be the best recommendation if you were baking a cake and you've never done it before? What would be the best thing you could do? Not rhetorical this time. Back. What would be the best thing you could do if you've never baked a cake and you want to bake a cake now?
Read the receipt or watch some videos.
So you read the recipe, right? Or watch a video. Well, I'm going to tell you that the procedure section of the method operates very similar to a recipe. And if you've never done something before, you'll notice that there's a series of steps. And if you don't follow the steps in order, you're not going to get a cake. For example, what happens if you prepare everything and then you preheat the oven at the end, right? So you've mixed the batter, you've put all the ingredients in, you put it in a tray, it says after a certain amount of time, take it out of the oven. And then all of a sudden you preheat the oven once it's out of the oven. Do you have a cake? No, you're stuck with batter. So the nice thing about a recipe is it tells you Step 1, preheat the oven. Step 2, get a large mixing bowl out. Step 3, put, and I'm totally making this up because I haven't made a cake from scratch, but get 16 ounces of pre-sifted flour. Gather 3 eggs. Whip till it's fully blended in, right? Pour the blended batter in a 9.5 by 11 pan or 9.5 by 12, whatever it is. Cook for 30 minutes, pull out, let sit for 10 minutes. You do that, you have a cake. I'm not sure it's going to taste good because all I had was flour and eggs. There was no sugar. There was no vanilla extract. There's no flavor whatsoever. But you certainly followed the instructions I gave you. And something's going to happen there. Now, we also need to think about the fact that that cake won't rise. But hey, Passover is coming. So maybe we don't want a cake that rises. Anyway, bad joke. All right. But you get the idea. So that would be a procedure for a recipe. I want you to think of your study. Well, what was the first thing we had to do? Now you start with the IRB approval. You don't start talking about, oh, I did a literature review. I looked at the data. The first thing you're going to say first, the study was submitted and approved by the IRB board. Afterwards, we populated our surveys onto Google Forms. We recruited participants using the following modalities. Data was entered and analyzed through SPSS, whatever version. Now you know exactly what you did. If someone wanted to replicate your study, they could. So, all right, so after the procedures, well, because I added this all messed up now, but then you have your references. I did X, Y to remind you that it's alphabetized by the first author's last name. And then you add Appendix A and you put a copy of the PHQ in. Appendix B, you put a copy of the MMPI in. C, your demographics questionnaire, and you're done. So that is, in a nutshell, the submission for your method and appendices. Questions? No questions on that? That was easier than I thought. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to take some time to put you in your groups. And I would like you to start first, if you want me to clean out your IRB, send me a message in the chat before I put you in your group. So then you're going to work in your group, and you're for the rest of that time after you finish your IRB, which is due today, you're going to work on populating your survey. And I'm not going to micromanage you on that. We're going to look at it again at the beginning of next class. So let me stop the recording.